We're going to consider the following example. As we read this problem, try to identify the given information. Can you identify mu naught? Can you identify n? What about x bar? What about s? What about the significance level? Okay, so again, try this on your own. You can even pause this video if you want to read the problem on your own and identify all those values. Here I'm going to use a text box to summarize all the information after I'm done reading the problem. A restaurant claims that they serve an average of 1,500 customers a day. In other words, this restaurant is saying in any day of the week, we have an average of 1,500 customers. So here they're claiming the mu is equal to 1,500. This is going to be the value of mu naught. This is the specific value that the restaurant claims mu to be equal to. Now, their competitor thinks that the restaurant serves less than 1,500 customers per day. This sentence is going to help us write our alternative hypothesis. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to stop and I'm going to complete step 1 because with the first 2 sentences, I can go ahead and state the null hypothesis and the alternative hypothesis. The null hypothesis is that the population mean is equal to 1,500. That is, mu is equal to 1,500. The alternative hypothesis is that the population mean is less than 1,500. That is, mu is less than 1,500. And again, when we refer to mu naught, this value is 1,500. This is a value that the restaurant claims mu to be equal to. Let's continue reading the problem. The competitor observed the number of customers served on 45 randomly selected days. So that is the value of n. N is equal to 45. During these 45 days, there were an average of 1,479 customers with a standard deviation of 63 customers. Here, we're given x bar, the sample mean. This is equal to 1,479, and the standard deviation of the sample, right? The standard deviation during these 45 days was 63. So this value here is S. Here, we don't have the standard deviation for the population. For that reason, we're not able to use the normal distribution. Here, we only have the standard deviation of the sample, which is why we're going to be using the t-distribution. Here in the text box, I'm going to summarize all those values. Again, n is equal to 45, x bar is equal to 1,479, and s is equal to 63. Now, what can we conclude at a 0.05 level of significance? We're not running confidence intervals, so that should say significance level. So this is a level of significance. So here we're given alpha equal to 0.05. Now, here notice we have mu less than 1,500 for the alternative hypothesis. This means that we're going to be conducting a left tilt test. For step 2, we're going to stop and acknowledge that we understand that there's conditions that need to be met for us to use the t-distribution. Here we can simply state that the distribution composed of t-scores follows a t-distribution, and we can go ahead and state the degrees of freedom here. I'm just going to write df is equal to, remember, the degrees of freedom is equal to n minus 1. Here we have n equal to 45, so 45 minus 1 is 44. That's all we're doing in step 2. In step 3, we need to find the t-score corresponding to our x bar value. I'm just going to find the t-score, and I'm going to go up to page 1, and I'm going to copy the formula that we need for the t-score. Notice we have everything we need to find the t-score. Here, x bar is going to be replaced with 1,479, mu is going to be replaced with 1,500, s is going to be replaced with 63, and n is going to be replaced with 45. Go ahead and enter this on your calculator. Now, if you're going to enter the whole expression at once, make sure to include parentheses here on the denominator. You want 1,479 minus 1,500 to be divided by the expression you have on the denominator. When you enter this on your calculator, you should be getting negative 2.236067977. Make sure not to round. Make sure to enter all the values that you see after the decimal. Now that we have the t-score, we can transition into finding the p-value. First, we're going to visualize the curve. We need to make sure that we understand what area we're trying to find. Here we have the t-distribution. At the center, we have the c-score corresponding to mu naught. And that t-score is going to be 0. But here I'm trying to emphasize that we're assuming that the null hypothesis is true. We're assuming that the center of the distribution is the t-score corresponding to mu naught. Now we found our t-score corresponding to x bar. We found that value to be negative 2.24 if I go ahead and round to 2 decimal places. So I'm just going to go ahead and label that t-score here on the left. Again, the t-score here at the center is 0. So I know that negative 2.24 is going to be here on the left. I'm going to write t corresponding to x bar, and I'm going to write the value that we found. Now we're wanting to find that area to the left of our t-score. Notice the alternative hypothesis is mu less than 1,500. We know that we're conducting a left tail test. If we're using a calculator, we're going to use the distribution TCDF. The lower bound is going to be a really large negative value, negative 1E99. The upper bound is going to be our t-score. Let me go ahead and just copy that value. And the last thing we need to provide this function is the degrees of freedom. The degrees of freedom is 44. Remember, that is n minus 1. That is 45 minus 1. If you enter this function on your calculator, you're going to have the value of the p-value. Now, if you're using Google Sheets or Excel, on an empty cell, you're going to type in equal t dot dist. You're going to need to provide the t-score that we found on step 3. Let me go ahead and copy that value. Then you need to provide the degrees of freedom, which is 44. At the end, you need to type true. Let me show you how to do this on the calculator in Google Sheets. On your calculator, you need to click on second bars. This is going to give you the list of the distributions. Then you're going to go down to TCDF. Press enter. And this is where you need to enter the lower bound, the upper bound, and the degrees of freedom. The lower bound is negative 1E99. The upper bound is your t-score. Make sure not to round your c-score. And then go ahead and enter the degrees of freedom. Go down to paste and press enter. Press enter again. Oh, I made a mistake. Let me go back. Can you see the mistake here? Notice the negative signs don't look the same. Here in front of 2, I have a subtraction sign instead of a negative sign. So I need to go ahead and fix that. Now I have negative 2 instead of minus 2. So let me press enter again. And here you have it. This is the p-value. Now, if you're using Google Sheets or Excel, you need to click on an empty cell, type in equal t dot dist. Go ahead and enter the t-score. Again, make sure not to round. Enter the degrees of freedom, which is 44, and then type true. And here you have it. This is your p-value. On your notes, go ahead and make a note of your p-value. Always make sure to write p-value is equal to something. Never write p, because then we can start getting confused and we can start thinking that we're talking about a population proportion. Okay, so the p-value is equal to what we got. It doesn't matter if you use the value that you got on the calculator, on Google Sheets or Excel. I'm going to use the value that I got on the calculator. Okay, so this is your p-value. Now we're ready to make a decision. On step 5, we need to decide if we're rejecting or failing to reject the null hypothesis. Once we make a decision, we can move on to step 6, where we write a conclusion. Okay? Now I'm going to stop here. I believe you're ready to do step 5 and 6 on your own. Again, on step 5, I'm going to ask you if you're rejecting or failing to reject the null hypothesis. And then on step 6, you need to write a conclusion. This is going to be a sentence that states the significant level you were using. You also need to indicate if you have sufficient evidence or not sufficient evidence to conclude the alternative hypothesis. And remember, you need to provide a description of what the alternative hypothesis represents. So go ahead and do this on your own. I'm going to make sure to include a solution below the questions that you're going to see after this video.